What up, fam? Let's get them headphones. Let's start this recording, motherfucker. All right, here we go. Shattered Worlds, The Serpent's Kiss. Chapter 14, Reynold. Greetings, human. Please sit. The man, or what passed for a man in this odd realm, was clad in a deep crimson velveteen robe, complete with gold sash and epaulets of emerald green. His ears were pierced in several places, his close-cropped beard streaked with brilliant... His ears were pierced in several places, his close-cropped beard streaked with brilliant stripes of red, blue, and green. His smile was strange, a bit too wide for Reynold's taste. His companions were similarly attired, but my tongue cannot work today. His companions were similarly attired, but expressionless and completely still. It was uncomfortable to meet such common-looking people and not receive the honors with which he was accustomed. He swept the tails of his jacket to the side and took a seat on the wide bench, Martok standing sentry a few steps behind. Ayanna waited until the man acknowledged her, then strolled in and sat beside Reynold. He felt her elbow nudge his side and shifted over to accommodate her. He shot her a stern glance, but softened immediately as he realized she was messing with him. Sisters. My lord, my name is Ayanna Stargazer, and this is my brother Reynold, captain of the Ferulian House Guard and loyal servant to Bellerophon VII, ruler of the First People. We honor you and are grateful for your hospitality. The man continued to smile, then went flat. Well met. Now, tell us. He waved to his compatriots and to Felista, the woman in white, standing or floating nearby. What you intend to do here in our village. Reynold tapped Ayanna on the elbow and cleared his throat before speaking. My lord, we are a scouting party from the human realm, looking for a pathway to an ancient gate, located somewhere here upon the great tree of power. The man pondered this, stroking his beard. He smiled again. Excellent. You will be our guests. No doubt you will require food as well as shelter. Tell your people to enter, but be certain that no harsh words are expressed. Our people are quite sensitive to extreme emotion and will not respond well. Also, there must be no bearing of blades within our borders. We are a peaceful people. The older man to his left muttered, Unless provoked. Unless provoked. The man with the sash nodded. Of course. Now then, let us make the acquaintance of your fellows. He snapped his fingers. Felista, bring the humans onto the grass. We would take their measure before we open our doors. The men stood and bowed ever so slightly. Felista floated over and helped Ayanna and Reynold to their feet. She leaned in close and whispered, They are quite impressed with you, my lord and lady. It is a good sign. As the three returned to the party, Reynold grumbled, These beings have no comprehension of our station. I don't like it. Ayanna sniffed. We are strangers in this place, brother. Our titles mean nothing to them. Reynold turned to face her, studying her lovely face. He calmed immediately. You are so wise, sister. There is much of father in you. Ayanna smiled and touched his arm. He thought for a second he could see a tear forming in her eye. Thank you, Rainey. That means a great deal. Strange how a few kind words could pierce his sister's harsh exterior. She was an unusual woman, to be sure. Or perhaps not. He'd never been great at sussing out the minds of women. He hoped he would continue to meet her standards. Without their father to honor him, he was adrift, lonely, and hungry for affection. Without their father to honor him, he was adrift, lonely, and hungry for affection. For the first time in months, he realized what he was feeling. He was happy. Has that ever happened to you where you just like realize, oh, like this isn't just a temporary moment, like I'm feeling happy today. That happened to me one day and it made me realize like how long I'd been depressed. Oh boy. Chapter 15. Portillion. Gods, Therese, look at it. It's wonderful. Portillion was waving at every corner of the village, twirling like a schoolboy and laughing with delight. He was so charming. It was hard not to give in to his exuberance. Oh, maybe this is Therese's chapter. Let's try it that way. Therese. Chapter 15. Therese. Gods, Therese, look at it. It's wonderful. Portillion was waving at every corner of the village, twirling like a schoolboy and laughing with delight. He was so charming, it was hard not to give in to his exuberance. As a sister of the merciful order, however, she maintained her cautious demeanor. Portillion, please. The villagers must perceive us as we are, an ambassadorial force. She took his elbow. Come, let us rejoin the group. He nodded, adopting a grave expression. Of course, you're right. I forget myself sometimes. He headed off to catch up to Ayanna and Grundle. It's all just so magical. He chuckled again, pulling her along. They caught up to Grundle, who was eyeing everything with a suspicious glare. Grundle, what do you think of it? Grundle grunted, shifting his heavy satchel. I don't like it. It's too perfect. Something weird has to be going on here. Therese smiled and took Grundle's elbow. Oh, Grundle, ever the watchful hero. Trust us, these people are no threat. Ayanna would sense immediately if they were. Grundle shrugged and scanned the horizon. For nearly 100 degrees to the north, the great tree of power stretched up as far as the eye could see. Had this world had a sun, the village would have been robed in near total darkness. Instead, the many branches and structures of the monument glowed with a pale light, painting the northeastern side of every surface a muted shade of greenish blue. Beyond the great tree, the sky faded into hazy nothingness, populated only sparsely with floating trees and gambling avian creatures, their soft colors shifting and fluttering into obscurity. That's a good sentence. I haven't read this in a while, so sometimes I'll just celebrate something. Closer at hand, the village stretched around the trunk of the tree's vastness, lazy and serene. Villagers peered out from every crack and window, carefully eyeing the party, paying close attention to their weapons. Grundle looked positively stricken with apprehension. He was clearly not a man who appreciated the mysterious. Portillion, on the other hand, was ecstatic. He turned to Therese and whispered, "Come on, let's go talk to the others." The pair bundled forward and caught up with the captain, Aeana, and the hulking leader of the troops, his mighty blade strapped tightly to his back. Portillion strode next to Aeana. "Beloved mother, have you given any thought to asking to visit their library? No doubt they will have maps and other resources." Aeana scowled. "Thank you, Portillion. Our first order of business is to secure lodging for the troops, and to ensure they do not break any rules." She leveled a glance at the troops arrayed across the field. Many of them had packed their surplus weaponry into crates. Some had even taken the radical step of removing their helmets without being given the order. Portillion noticed a vein pulsing just... So now it's Portillion. Shit. I might just, for these books, forget even mentioning the character's name at the start of each chapter. Maybe just, mention it in the text. It's, trying to be like George R.R. Martin, but he has really large chapters in which he can kind of, I don't know, I have pretty short chapters, so it's more jarring if something is not as focused. Here we go. Portillion noticed a vein pulsing just beneath Reynolds' hairline. Goodness, his men better not get too comfortable. Reynolds likely to blow a fuse. Portillion had seen superiors lose it on their underlings before. It always filled him with dread. It wasn't the way a gentleman should behave. Of course, as a wizard, he had far less to fear from a crowd of goons with mag rifles. When you can melt a man's brain with the snap of your fingers, most people tended to avoid confrontations. Portillion pitied Reynold. The burden of command must lay heavy on his shoulders. Yeah, the burden of command. Chapter 16. Reynold. Help me with these damn pads, for God's sake. Reynold was mad with frustration. First, his men completely disregard the decorum of service, and now that he was trying to discard his own armor pieces to imply that such had been his idea, his damnable pads were refusing to cooperate. A mammoth shape buffeted him from behind. It was Martok. Your clasps, my lord. Let me assist you. Stargazer threw his hands to his waist and straightened to allow Martok access to the buckles. Forgive me for the men, my lord. Had I imagined they would behave thusly, I would not have brought them into the village. I am shamed by my lack of leadership. Reynold turned his head. Martok's beard shot out from his golden helmet like a billy goat nosing his way under a curtain. Reynold sighed. Don't blame yourself, Lieutenant. My command is young. In the next few days, they will know my mettle, and served me without reluctance. He cast his eyes across their line. Until this year, I was known as an unenlightened adolescent. But times have changed. He turned to face his loyal man-at-arms, eyes steely with a determined fury. Once we're settled, bring me the first 3 men who defied decorum. Martok nodded. Reynolds spoke. I should break their fingers for their disloyalty. Martok smiled. Reynolds was surprised. He'd never noticed Martok was missing a few teeth. That's a weird place to end it. What's that got to do with anything? I don't know. You ever just notice something about your best friend that's like, I never noticed that before. It's like that. Chapter 17. Therese. Pleasing Portillion was easy. A few squeezes of the hips, a pump or 2 of the fingers, lips and eyes and milk-white breasts dallied into his grasp, and he was melted butter. It was a simple formula for the implementation of her plan. It was the spirit's plan, really. The old witch had a strange obsession with the boy. She wanted Therese to please him quite often. It was as if she felt a mother's love for him, but the way she expressed it was through the application of the maiden's flesh. It was a bit unusual, Therese acknowledged, but it wasn't as if he was her actual son, or any blood relation at all. Therese's blood was thick with the milk of Bellerophon and Tamarin, and Portillion's silky sweetness would join with hers to feed a greater hunger. It was uncommon for priestesses to give birth, but not unheard of. Therese and Portillion's child would bear the blood of kings and flow with the magic of an ancient god. The vengeful spirit demanded that the agent of her corruption be well taken care of. Therese knew better than to defy her mistress anything she required. Therese had known the spirit mere minutes before she'd succumbed to its desires. But doing so was the best decision she'd ever made. With this bargain, she'd become more powerful than any novice or lesser noblewoman had any right to be. Her only sacrifice had been that of her virginity. But what did that matter? It wasn't doing anything for her. May as well give it up for the glory of her goddess. Oh, right. That. Well, if the only goddess one ever meets is a monster, at least it had the decency to introduce itself. Her beloved Mercy Zora had never so much as sneezed in her direction. Portillion, do you love me? She looked up at him, her big, round, brown eyes staring wavily up at him from below. I say up at him twice. I don't like that. She looked up, her big, round, brown eyes staring wavily at him from below. He gulped, the rolling heat of his orgasm still moving through his extremities. She wiped a hand across her lips, her larynx moving up and down as she swallowed the last of his seed. Of course, Therese. I have always, will always. She leapt to her feet, taking her hands from his manhood and throwing them around his naked body. She burrowed her beautiful face into his chest. I believe you, Port. I do. She looked in his eyes again, lips quivering. He wrapped his arms around her and held her, lightly running his fingers down the length of her blonde hair. But why do you ask? Surely you know I do. She smiled, running a finger down her lips, along her throat, and down her own elegant, voluptuous curves. She blinked coquettishly. I know, but I like to hear it. She could feel him beginning to stir again, his member growing against her belly. She thought she could feel a touch of soft liquid dancing expectantly between his sex and her navel. You wish to take me again? Perhaps from here? She dropped her eyes to indicate where she next wished to be invaded. Therese turned slowly away from Portillion as she raised from her half-crouch. As she reached the end of her turn, she pressed her backside hard against his stiffening cock. He was stiff as Condiff concrete. He was stiff as Condiff concrete, and half again as mighty. As he burst inside her, she erupted, flowing again and again with the union of male and whatever it was that encircled her sex from within. The spirit, the witch, the unholy mother, her bloody mistress, the unseen stranger, the murdering force, its powers as debauched as they were immense. She was truly a demon among all demons. She would feast upon the boy, and then she would rule. It was the only thing that made sense. She had no choice. It was in her nature. So that is probably the nastiest chapter I've done since I started this project. I just said to myself, there's a character in Dean Koontz's Dark Rivers of the Heart who's like a spy or a criminal or whatever. And she's just obsessed with herself and her own beauty and like sex, but only like selfishly. And I thought, well, what if a pretty, entitled, rich white woman was also invaded by a demon? You know, how bad could it get? And now we're seeing like, and it's also like that's, what was the season of American Horror Story set in a mental institution? There was a nurse, I think it was Kirsten Dunst, but anyway, or Chloe Sevigny, one of those blonde ladies, played a nurse that went bad, a nun. Is that the right word? A nun. So that's Therese's deal. Yeah, I guess that'll do it. You know what to do. Go to the website awesomepod.squarespace.com. Listen to my podcasts. Everything is awesome. It's interviews. I put this stuff up there. What's next? Shattered Worlds RPG, which is the actual play podcast where we use the role-playing game system that I invented. We kind of play test it and work it out. It's sci-fi, space fantasy. Oh, it's just like this. and yeah, The War for the Tower, which is an actual play set in the world of Stephen King's Dark Tower. It's fucking great. It's a little more produced. And it's just so fantastic. So many good people on that show. So I guess that's it. I will see y'all on the flip. Is that what I say at the end of these? Peace.